Today, we're honoring Dr. Kerin Orbuch, our Sister of the Year in Women's Health. She's a mother, daughter, sister, women's advocate, the author of the best-selling Beating Endo, How to Reclaim Your Life from Endometriosis, and a prominent subject matter expert in Below the Belt, a powerful film executively produced by Hillary Rodham Clinton. Dr. Iris is a fellowship-trained endometriosis excision surgeon. She sees the value in addressing endometriosis as an inflammatory disease, with the cornerstone of endometriosis treatment being the surgical excision of endometriosis. Dr. Iris understands the importance of incorporating integrative medicine and combining Eastern and Western medicine approaches in helping her patients heal and getting them on the road to recovery. She is devoted to helping all people live a productive, joyful, and pain-free life, though helping teens and adolescents is a real passion. Dr. Iris is currently on the AAGL Foundation Board, was the former president of the AAGL Endometriosis Special Interest Group, has published numerous articles and chapters and lectured extensively, and is currently part of Washington, D.C. SWHR, Society for Women's Health Research, Endometriosis Working Group. She has been featured by Cosmopolitan, Vogue, Allure, The Today Show, NBC, CA Live, WSJ, CNN, US News, National Geographic, Marie Claire, The Washington Post, NPR, Stylecaster, People, The Ethos, Romper, Health Central, as well as many more publications and broadcast networks. Her passion is advocacy, pushing for policy change, and raising awareness of endometriosis.
What prompted me to go into medicine initially was my dad. My dad was a cardiologist. He's now passed, and he was a huge mentor in my life. And he would take me on rounds with him when I was a little kid. And that's what prompted me to go into medicine. And then when I was a resident in New York City, and I walked into the operating room and I saw minimally invasive surgery, and it was an endometriosis surgery, actually. I knew it. Like, I knew my knowing, and I followed that path. That sparked, plus the curiosity that I have. I'm just like a curious soul, and I'm always trying to figure out how and why things work, and I don't accept things at face value, and I question them. There was one sentence about pain that said, maybe there's another reason for pain in those with endometriosis. And that just piqued my curiosity. And I have been trying to solve that and to better understand this disease. And, what I love in regards to taking care of women is that in general, the patient population, they're totally underserved. And they are they want to get better. There's a will. And then women have this ability to inspire other people or their families or their neighbors or their community or members in their religious community or whatever it is. And it just seemed like the right fit to me. So what inspired me? So part of it was cultivated from my dad to help people. And part of it is I just have this intuition, this knowing. And when I walked into that OR, I was in flow. Everything was in alignment in my body. And I knew this is it. And I never questioned it. And I never turned back. And I just felt like this is where I can help people. And interestingly, and again, I don't think life is random. I ended up having endometriosis, not knowing it, being diagnosed very late in life. And probably both of my daughters, but one has been diagnosed. And I shudder to think what her life would have been if when she was 9 years old and she started having gut issues, I wasn't the person fighting for her saying, geez, I wonder if she has endometriosis, because no doctor wanted to believe that that was the case. And I feel like I was put on this planet to, and one of my specialties are teens with endo. I don't know if I was here to help heal my kids. I don't know if I was just like right exactly where I was supposed to be. And I trusted the medical community who was telling me, you don't have endo, you're manifesting your patient's pain. So that's why I so understand the gaslighting that so many of those who are suffering undergo, because I too suffered from that. Now, thankfully, and maybe it was meant to be, because it caused me to really figure out all different modalities that were contributing to pain, whether it was in my patients or myself. So as I was learning about the gut and healing my gut, I started adopting it for my patients as the physical therapy, the mind body, every different element. I was healing every bit of pain except the root cause, which was the endo. I think a lot of the challenges that I faced were early on. Being part of a surgical organization who didn't want to hear about anything non-surgical. And it was an uphill battle because I'm a surgeon, right? And I'm part of, in general, surgical organizations where it's just endo, give me a scalpel, endo, take to surgery. And yes, I do believe that the cornerstone of endo is excision of endometriosis, but endo is an inflammatory disorder that sets forth inflammation from head to toe. So we have to undo all of that, especially with that diagnostic delay we previously spoke about. So it was a challenge. I felt like a salmon swimming upstream. And that endo is an inflammatory disorder that is systemic. And that was so hard earlier on, not even the last 5 years, preceding the last 5 years, because I was one of the only ones who was approaching it in a multidisciplinary approach. And they'd say, well, I saw Dr. So-and-so, and they just said I need surgery. And you're telling me I should go to pelvic floor PT, and you're telling me to meditate, and you're telling me to test for SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and you're recommending I work with an integrative nutritionist, and you're thinking, not every patient has all of these. And why should no one else is saying what you're saying? And people want the quick fix and the quick answers. But what was happening after they went for that quick fix, and they're like, I'm in worse pain, I don't understand. And I'm like, well, let's talk about the central nervous system and central sensitization, which is what I talked about before on the initial consult. So, that was a huge uphill battle. But now and that's what prompted me to write my book, Beating Endo, How to Reclaim Your Life from Endometriosis, because I was in the Manhattan area at the time, and I collaborated with a pelvic floor PT, Amy Stein, and I wanted a guidebook for patients because I really realized pretty early on that doctors were not changing. And the only way to change doctors was for patients to drive the market. And I wanted to give patients across the country and across the world a handbook to hand to their physicians to say, can I have a prescription for pelvic floor PT? Can I have a prescription for SIBO? Can I, and I felt like that was like the transformation. And it even took a couple of years after that book came out for other doctors to start. But now most endosurgeons will do surgery. And then when the patient's like, I'm still in pain, they're like, I don't know, why don't I give you a prescription for pelvic floor PT? It's like, why don't you just do all of this stuff beforehand while the patient's waiting for surgery? So the multidisciplinary approach was tough for patients to begin adopting. I think storytelling allows us to touch the hearts and minds of people. And medicine, and when I went through medical school and I went through my training, it's just all like we do it this way. And what has happened, as we got out of like note taking, where we're sitting across from a patient and we began to start utilizing electronic medical records, and physicians often had their back to the patient so they could be typing on the computer. And a lot of doctors still do that. So I would never do that. And like, physicians just also, because of insurance companies, just had to start seeing more and more volume, 40 patients a day, 7 minutes are up, you're gone. And it became, medicine has become so not personalized. Like most physicians, we go into medicine because we care about helping, but the system just exhausts physicians that you just can't do that. Like I always told my patients, and I've said it to friends, I work for myself. If I ever had a nurse administrator or physician, some administrator of a hospital telling me you have to see someone in 7 minutes, you just spent an hour and a half in a consult, you cannot do that, I would go be a yoga teacher. Like I would never practice medicine like that. So I just feel like we need to have that connection with patients. We need to undo what is being taught in medical school and residency these days. One of my passions is trauma and medical trauma. And probably if I get around to writing another book, that is what my next book will be on. I think so many of my patients, I can speak to endo and I think also globally, because of the diagnostic delay for endo, and there's many autoimmune diseases where there's a diagnostic delay for multiple reasons. Because of the diagnostic delay, those with endo are they're just not believed, or that coupled with all the mistraining in medical school and residency. And I parenthetically, I tell patients, I learned more in my first week of fellowship than I did in 4 years of OBGYN training plus 4 years of medical school. That means in 8 years, I learned less than I did in 1 week of residency. And so it is so sad what is going on in terms of training today. So I really believe that we just have to fight that fight and to help those, who are suffering. My dad, for a decade, said to me, because he was a very prolific author. Like my first chapters that I ever did, even before I went to medical school, were written when I worked in his cardiology lab. So my dad was all about like publishing. And literally for 10 years, every single day, because we spoke about an hour a day on most days, he was like, how's your book coming? And I'm like, I am so busy. I have 2 kids. I run my own business. I am so busy with so many things, like teaching courses and doing all of these things, and every single day. And so it was in my mind. I was cultivating it in my mind the entire time during those 10 years, literally. And finally, I was ready to write it. So it was something I knew I was always going to do. I wonder if I didn't have that encouragement from my dad and that daily question, how's your book coming? Have you started it yet? So I think it's kind of like a tribute to him. And because initially I was helping one patient at a time, right? And I'm like, how am I going to tackle this problem that afflicts 200 million worldwide, right? At least 10% of those who have like a uterus. And I'm like, how am I going to do that one-on-one? And then I wrote the book, and then I'm doing podcasts to help more people. And then I have all of these other things coming down the pipeline. So that's kind of how it all unfolded. OB and GYN combined is just too much information. obstetrics is a whole field in of itself. And OBGYN now is looked at as a primary care field, like family medicine, internal medicine. Primary care fields are not surgeons. Endo, you have to be a really good surgeon. So I've really been advocating for them to divide OB into one residency and gynecology in another residency, because I learned more about managing diabetes in pregnancy than I did how to operate or work on critically ill patients in residency. So what good is that when it comes to endometriosis? And then now we're diagnosing more people with endometriosis because of social media, but there's not enough surgeons to do the surgery, because surgery for endometriosis is harder than cancer surgery. My first patient, she was 15, who I took to the OR. And she loved drama and musical theater, and that's what gave her life and livelihood. And she had withdrawn from all those things that she loved so much. And I operated on her, and she ended up being doing amazing. And she ended up being able to go back and do the drama and the musical theater. And she invited me back to her high school. Her and her mom had called me and said, can you come and talk to other parents here and the school nurses, and to see her glow when I met her in the parking lot when I drove down to her school a couple hours away. And just to witness her doing those things that she loved, that she couldn't do because of the debilitating pain, that to me is stuff like that are and I have these stories every day in a different capacity, whether for one person it's musical theater, for the other person it's just being a caretaker for their children, for another person it's being able to be their best at the art gallery that they run. For another person, it is just being able to show up for their best friend. Whatever that something is, it's every day there's different stories like that. I think for it to be a priority, I know for it to be a priority and more funding, but real funding. Sometimes there's money in things, but it just gets tied into the wrong things. I do think, endometriosis and diabetes afflict about the same people. When someone, when someone has diabetes, they are automatically, this is all in network for diabetes, they're sent to the ophthalmologist to look at their eyes. They're sent to the podiatrist to look at their feet. They're sent to the nutritionist to help them. They're sent to the internist. They're sent to the endocrinologist. They're sent to, and the prescription sent right to the drugstore for the blood glucose monitors. Most insurances cover all of these things, right? And there's diabetes centers, and it's a well-oiled machine. Endo afflicts the same number of people, but we don't have any of that. So my hope and dream is that it will be like that. Trust your gut. The gut is the brain of the body, right? The gut is, as I mentioned, where autoimmune diseases come from. There's a mind-gut connection. I do believe the gut actually is the brain. So when we have a gut feeling or an intuition, you're knowing that if something's wrong, but the doctor's saying your CT is normal, your MRI is normal, your ultrasound's normal, but you're not feeling well, you're knowing and keep searching. And also to stand up against the dismissal. Don't allow people to tell you that there's nothing wrong with you when you know that there is something wrong with you.